A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Monday, we like to check in with the Australian Christian Lobby, talk about the political agenda for the week ahead. Well, Michelle Pearse, the CEO of the ACL, is back with us. Hey, Michelle, welcome back to 2020.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me again.
Michelle, let's get a focus first up on the state of Queensland and around the issues of, abortion and the movements of what happened in the lead up to the recent Queensland election with the Katter's party and Robbie Katter, who was planning to introduce a bill into this new Queensland Parliament all around the issue of live births. And that's been stymied. What's the latest from your side?
Oh, it's absolutely shocking what just happened in Queensland last week. The new Queensland Premier of the LNP party, David Crisafulli, last week he introduced a motion to the Queensland Parliament without any notice, which effectively bans any discussion in the Queensland Parliament about abortion. So this is a shock move. Something like this hasn't happened before. He just decided that he was going to effectively gag anybody from within the LNP from being able to bring up abortion, talk about abortion. If somebody brings forward a bill that they aren't allowed to, that nobody in the Parliament is allowed to debate this bill. We know that Robbie Katter from the Katter Party in Queensland was going to reintroduce his bill to protect babies who survive abortions. But simply because the word abortion is in that bill, that's not allowed to be presented to the Parliament because no debate is allowed to be had. And we were all shocked last week when this happened. Everybody in the pro-life community is really up in arms about it. We've let our supporters know. We're encouraging our supporters to write to the Premier and to their local member because every single LNP member voted to support this motion. Even those that we know are pro-life in the party voted to support this motion. This is undemocratic. Like I said, this isn't heard of before. The last time that we saw a move like this was from the Greens party in the Senate just a few weeks ago when they tried to remove the live births bill in the Senate. So there is an aggressive push against the protection of these babies, and it's abhorrent.
Some might be thinking this is a move from a strong premier who's taking control and knows that this is a emotive issue and therefore he wants to just give himself a smooth sailing set of circumstances. Others might even say this is akin to some sort of evil authoritarianism. From what I'm hearing from you, I'm hearing that you sort of lean the authoritarianism way with what the new premier in Queensland is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, if this was about any other sort of controversial issue, the whole community would be up in arms. But because this is about abortion and abortion is such a polarising issue, that only those who are really actively against abortion and are out there bringing their pro-life views out into the public square, they're the only ones that are really speaking outright about this, and our supporters and those who support other pro-life groups. But imagine if the government, the Premier said that no debate is allowed on gambling, or no debate is allowed to be had on drugs, or no debate is allowed to be had on the sex industry. These are all sort of controversial issues, but we're allowed to have community debate. These things are allowed to be discussed in Parliament, as any issue should. Any private member has an ability to bring forward a bill, but this is incredibly undemocratic and against freedom of expression to be able to ban debate about such an important issue. And, when you're speaking about live births, this is really the pointy edge of abortion. This is, the result of an abortion being in a live birth really does bring it home to people that abortion involves the killing of a live human being. Of course, that is incredibly confronting. That is incredibly uncomfortable to consider, especially if you're on the pro-choice side of the argument. However, I really believe that with proper debate, with proper education, that we could, they could as a parliament, and we could as a community accept fact that babies who survive abortions are due the same level of care as any baby who survives an abortion. But we've been gagged from even being able to have that being presented in Parliament.
It's amazing. I read one article from a publication that leans to the left, and the complaint was that they can't push things further in their pro-abortion agenda. In one sense, you might say that could be a positive, but here you have a new government, one that you might be hoping is open to in some ways, repeal some of the absolutely abhorrent laws around abortion, and that has been gagged. What is this saying, Michelle, about the MPs on the LNP side of the benches who are passionate about reforming abortion laws, who don't like the idea that they've been gagged, but they've all voted for this as it is? Is it saying something about those MPs? I mean, a lot of those MPs, and we might even suggest that there are new MPs in the Queensland Parliament who are Christian MPs. How would they be feeling? What is this saying about them, do you think?
I mean, I can't judge exactly why they voted to support this motion. I would hope that there was some vigorous opposition for it before they were out on the floor in the Parliament. Usually on issues of life, in the Liberal Party, members are given a conscience vote. So it must have been in this case that perhaps they weren't given a conscience vote on this issue. So, we're just hoping that some of those pro-life MPs that are moved by their conscience will be having something to say to the Premier about this, with all of the amount of people within the community that are contacting their members and contacting their Premier. We're still really hoping that this decision can be reversed. On the other side of the issue, we have the Greens are pushing to have abortion access widened. So perhaps when you're saying that they were saying this stifles that kind of debate, well, perhaps it does. But federally, they're looking at pushing for more funding for abortion services in regional areas. But I'd just like to put the point out there that there's reasons why hospitals in regional areas don't do specifically late-term abortions, but even the abortion pill. It's because there are so many complications as a result of these procedures, and you need better facilities in order to care for women that have post-abortion complications. But it seems like the Greens are so fixed on pushing abortion access further and wider in every kind, right up into birth, wherever there's a hospital, not giving consideration to the safety of women, to the ability for doctors to perform and then care for the women after the procedure, where there's going to be a significant amount of complications. It seems like to them it's not really about the safety of women; it's more about increasing the number of abortions, and that's just, to us, it's devastating. It's really sad, because we do believe in the sanctity of life, that these babies are precious, and whatever moves that we can make to ensure that abortion isn't further liberalised. At the moment, it's as liberal as it could be, but then increasing the access to these areas means more precious lives will be destroyed.
Well, Michelle, as Christians, we do, as you say, believe in the sanctity of life, that every life is valuable because we're made in the image and likeness of God. And we also know that God made male and female. These things take us right back to Genesis, affirmed by Jesus himself. So if there's any doubt, really it comes back to what did Jesus have to say about these sorts of things? Let's talk about the male-female thing, because puberty blockers, another big issue in Australia, used by Australian health providers for children with gender dysphoria. What's the latest? There's some developments here?
Yeah, ACL is unrelenting in our push that there has to be a federal inquiry into the safety of the use of puberty blockers on children. In the UK and many European countries, they've banned puberty blockers. But I wanted to bring it up today because just last week, the Labor government in England ruled to permanently ban puberty blockers. Now, the previous Conservative government, which was recently the Labor government had come in, but in the previous government, they banned it under the NHS. But this government has taken it even further to even ban puberty blockers from private clinics. And this is because there is no evidence that shows that they're safe. In fact, it's the opposite. It shows how damaging they are, that they have permanent side effects. And we have many detransitioners speaking out about the damage that's being done to, or has been done permanently to their bodies. They'll never be the same again. And so we're taking this information, we're giving it to our health ministers, we're trying to get it out there in the media as much as we can. The Australian did do some reports on this development this week, which is great, but further, it hasn't gotten any further than the Australian. But meanwhile, in Australia, we're continuing to prescribe puberty blockers to children. They're continuing to destroy their bodies, whilst other nations in the world are continuing to wind this back. We're forging ahead. And so this is going to be an election issue. We're pushing it in every state as well, that this has gone, again, too far, and Australia has to do something urgently to address this.
Michelle, is this a scandal? I mean, sometimes that word gets overused. Perhaps it's being underused right now, because this looks to me like the sort of scandal that you would think that media would be all over, exposing this left, right and centre, when such medicine given to vulnerable young children without proof that it's safe. That sounds to me like a scandal, and you've got all of that evidence of what's gone on in the UK and the Cass review and the closure of that controversial Tavistock clinic. You know, as you said, it's a ban that's on right now, and it's a permanent ban. Is this a scandal? What are your thoughts?
It absolutely is a scandal. Wes Streeting, who's the health minister in the UK, has called it a scandal himself. So the UK, in the levels of government, in the Labor government, are calling it a scandal. So my hope is that it's only a matter of time before Australia will wake up to this. It's already too late, because already too many children have been harmed through this. But I don't think, I really don't believe that they can continue to ignore it for much longer, because the voices of those that have been affected by this will continue to grow in number. Detransitioners, parents of kids that have transitioned. There'll be legal cases, as has been in the UK, and we're going to have legal cases here. And the evidence showing that the harm that puberty blockers are doing to children is going to be undeniable. And we see President Trump making claims that he's going to take, doctors who perform these surgeries to court. That's how extreme it's gotten. And Australia's going to have to wake up to the reality at some point. We just hope that through our efforts and the efforts of many other groups can urge this to happen sooner rather than later.
Interesting, isn't it? Because there's two sets of people you can listen to in this. You could listen to the clinicians, you could listen to those scientists, those ones who are in favour of doing the right thing for our children, or you can listen to politically motivated, ideologically driven activists. And it seems to me, and I'll get your impression here, but it seems to me that governments federally and around the states are not listening to the clinicians at all.
No, they're not. When you're speaking broadly, there are a few MPs in every parliament that are really concerned and are considering ways that they can bring this issue forward. So we do have private members that are looking to present motions for an inquiry. We've had failed motions for inquiries before, but I think as this issue continues to progress, more and more people are waking up. We try again. But what I really hope is that when they launch an inquiry, that whilst the inquiry is being undertaken, that they immediately ban puberty blockers whilst they look into it. Because if there's even a question over their potential harm to children, they should be immediately withdrawn until an inquiry is done into their safety and effectiveness.
And so out of the LGBTQI, it's the T who is really at risk with these puberty blockers. The T in that set of letters, transgender. There's some developments in the New South Wales Department of Education reviewing its transgender students in schools. A legal document around that. What's the latest there?
Yes, so the last time that the New South Wales Department of Education sought legal advice of how to treat transgender students in schools was in 2014. So this has been updated. But I wanted to bring this up because it shows how confusing the issue has became. Sorry. So for non-contact sports, the department says let the kids play as their identified gender. So things like gymnastics, that when it's a non-contact sport, they can play as their identified gender. But for contact or semi-contact sports, transgender students should mostly be permitted, they say. But with collision sports, trans students should be excluded due to the risk of injury to themselves or others. So there's three different types of categories that may or may not accept a trans student within their sporting team. So it's really confusing, but it's not just confusing, it's really unfair. It's unfair for girls that are going to be denied being selected for sports teams because perhaps a boy who identifies as a girl is better than them. Perhaps girls will be denied from going to, regional or state level events within their public school system because biological boys playing in the girls' sports team may have an advantage over them. So it really undermines, all the good work that's been done over decades to increase the participation of girls in sports. Even just for local sports teams, girls who would otherwise, who would have made the team will be forced to stay behind whilst biological boys who identify as girls take their places. So again, it's this further progression of this issue that's confusing, but not only confusing, terribly unfair for girls.
And, there are those who say there are some remedies for all of this, simple things that can change the trajectory of what's happening around these things, inserting the words male and female back into the Sex Discrimination Act. I imagine, though, you've got to have a set of candidates, or MPs, or a government that wants to stand for these sorts of things to bring some sort of resolution rather than being in the grey area all the time. There is an election that's coming up for the federal government in the new year. What sort of things are you planning at the Australian Christian Lobby? You always have a dedicated website to these things, and I imagine you're putting some resources into this to develop how people can be informed about how MPs and candidates are going to be campaigning. What are the things that you've got planned for the federal election coming up?
Yeah, we really want to serve the Christian community this election by providing them all of the information they need to ensure that their vote counts, to ensure that they have the knowledge and the information that they need to select the best candidate within their electorate. And I really would encourage Christians, don't just vote for the party that you've already voted for, vote for the best candidate in your electorate. And to vote for the best candidate, you need to know what the values are of all of your candidates. And so we've created a resource, or we are creating at the moment, where you can type in your postcode, and we're seeking responses from as many candidates as possible who will give us 200 words on why a Christian should vote for them, and you can read their responses online. And we're also wanting to put up some Senate interviews with lead Senate candidates, and they'll be more informed as to what their party position is on the range of issues that are relevant to Christians. So we'll be asking the Senate candidates the hard questions. And we'll also be campaigning in marginal seats and also in seats where really good people are running. ACL's non-party partisan, but we want to ensure that good people, no matter what party they're in, are elected. And so I encourage you, if you're keen to influence the outcome, particularly marginal seats, to put up your hand to volunteer for the Australian Christian Lobby. There are letterbox drops and different things we'll be doing. So you can sign up on our website as a volunteer. But in terms of our key asks for the federal election to the major parties, the priority is religious freedom. To be able to even speak about the things that we care about, we need the freedom to be able to do so. And we need protection over our conscience as well, to operate according to our ethos, to refuse to do those things that are against against what we believe. But freedom of expression has also been a rising issue within this last term of government because of threats like the misinformation bill bill and other moves that have been made to limit the ability for anybody, not just Christians, to be able to speak their opinions as they believe them in the public square. And then, as you mentioned, Neil, what's integral is that the Sex Discrimination Act identifies the biological definition of male and female. This has been watered down and lost through different interpretations, particularly recently with a case that went to the court that has now set a precedent that's effectively removed that biological definition. And so that needs to be clarified in legislation, the definition of male and female. So those three things will be pushing freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and the biological definition of male and female. But ACL will provide a range of knowledge and resources that are a broad variety of issues, from foreign aid and gambling advertising to these things like religious freedom and gender that the government needs to seriously consider. So please continue to look at our resources on australiavotes.org.au in the lead up to the election.
Okay, there's some very good reasons to visit the Australia Votes website, but no doubt there'll be a link there on the ACL website. ACL stands for Australian Christian Lobby. They are on the front line and they're battling for the values, and I think they're battling for your values. If you're a biblical Christian, Michelle Pearse, the CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby, is battling for your values to be shaping our national culture. And if we don't do anything, someone else's values are being legislated, and that's what we've been seeing certainly over this last decade or two in a very much increasing and accelerated way. So to connect with Michelle, to be part of any of those campaigns, acl.org.au. acl.org.au. Michelle Pearse, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thanks, Neil. God bless and Merry Christmas.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.